contacted Mark. Looks like we're ready.
I'd like to call to order the June 17th, 2025 Health and Ed Committee meeting. The first item we will do is call the roll, please.
Commissioner Oliver,
Present.
Commissioner Davidson,
Here.
Commissioner Wilson,
Here.
Commissioner Boyd, Commissioner McMurray, Commissioner Gooch, Chairman Dodd.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any public comments signed up for tonight? All right, so tonight's meeting, we have one item on the agenda, and that is the end-of-year cleanup budget and amendments for the school board. And they will recognize revenues and place those revenues in an appropriate position. And I believe the school board voted on this on the 12th, and it passed the school board, I believe, unanimously. And after tonight, it will go to budget tomorrow night, I believe. So without further ado, and I will state for the record that minutes for the May meeting will be heard at a future date. Dr. Sullivan and Director Runyon, podium's yours. Hello, Dr. Martin.
Hello, Commissioners. First, and I'll just go in order the way they are on SharePoint. So number one that is listed as Fund 141, Health and Ed, agenda item number 10. And then the last one, fiscal year 24-25, Fund 141, amendment number 10. So the first and last one go together. So this is Fund 141, Fund Balance Amendment, this year-end cleanup amendment, budget $17,402,929 for items such as leave payouts, increases for degree and certification pay scale changes, stipends, insurance premium increases, adjustments for amended Innovative Schools Model Program, additional costs for contracted services, and capital outlay for construction. Also, increased costs for liability insurance due to recent transportation claims is included in the amendment. Next, it budgets additional expenditures for maintenance, custodial supplies, student and staff support, contracted services. Finally, it funds the purchase of one-to-one computers for high school students, student laptops and mobile charging stations for elementary schools. Funding for these expenses comes from additional TISA and state revenue, as well as indirect costs from cafeteria program. The revenue and transfers are collected above budgeted amounts and allow additional expenditures in the movement of current budgeted expenditures between multiple accounts and within object codes. And this is just our typical year-end cleanup working with our department. We just a little background, if you don't mind.
Please, yes.
So we had talked about for multiple months with this committee trying to pull one-to-one high school computers out of fund balance, and instead we were able to do it out of this cleanup amendment. And so that's a positive as well, getting additional TISA funds to be able to cover it out of a cleanup amendment. So you will not see one-to-one computers come before you out of a cleanup amendment coming out of fund balance. So we were able to take care of it out of this. So that was almost $6 million out of this cleanup amendment we were able to cover. So, yep, appreciate Brian's work on that, moving every little penny. So that's why you see some of these have small line item movements, because any funds we did not think we were using, we were trying to come up with the additional funds to cover those one-to-one laptops.
So all your decreases are likewise just if you had money and you knew you weren't going to expend it, you just pulled it.
In additional, you'll see some in salaries. Because of accruals, so the way the commission schedule falls this year, we still have our teacher payroll for June 20th, July 20th, and August 20th. So we still have a quarter of the year to go for our payrolls. And so in multiplying everything out with our accruals, anything that we were even remotely concerned about potentially being over with payouts and leave and vacations, there's probably more than enough funding there, but we added extra funds there just to be safe. We've done that the last couple of years. Same for insurance premiums.
But the payroll personnel is not for new positions or new people. It's for funding anticipated expenses just to wrap the year up.
Correct.
Or actually wrap up the summer.
Yeah, wrap up the summer and wrap up 3 payroll months still that we have left to go, even though the fiscal year ends June 30th. And medical insurance is one we always come back and amend in. We budget certain percentages increases, but we, being on our own medical insurance now, depending on what the State Department does, since we're on state insurance, and what the board chooses to cover of that, we usually have to come in and use some of our our unbudgeted revenue of TISA funds to cover some of that medical insurance cost. Yeah, and we don't get the percentage of what the state's going to increase until budget's already done, so. But that's the general portion of it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Phillips.
Dr. Sullivan,
Yes, sir.
I had a question to ask about cleanup.
Yeah.
There's a perception, and people that are listening, if there's anybody listening,
Yeah.
there's people that are listening that thinks that cleanup means that we are figuring out ways to spend money that we didn't spend. So would you just give a
Absolutely
brief
not.
definition of what cleanup really means?
Yeah, cleanup amendments are ways that when we go and make sure that accounts are, just like you have your electricity bill, for example, and you're looking at your electricity bill from 1 month to the next, you're estimating to see what those accounts are going to be. You want to make sure you have enough funds in all of your accounts, and our payroll ones are the big ones because we still have 3 months left to pay out. We're making sure that funds are where they need to be. For the school system, we also don't budget all of our revenue that we get from the state, the biggest one being outcome funding. It's about $4 million that we do not budget, we anticipate additional costs throughout the year, but we don't find that outcome funding until December, and so we recognize that additional funding throughout the year. We actually cut our spending off in May, and then through emergencies, we allow it through June, and then we cut all of our spending off June 6th. So it is definitely not just spending money, because that's how we build such a healthy fund balance. Great question.
Question.
Commissioner Oliver.
Your TISA funding, is this $8,026,166?
Which one are we looking at?
76, 100, 99, 100, where it says TISA?
I think she's looking.
Which account number was that again, Commissioner?
76, 100, 99, 100. It says TISA.
Okay, so you're looking at the 99-100. Is the object code, is it 595 or 590?
595.
595, what that is TISA on behalf payments. So what that is basically a wash. The state gives us a number, and what that's going to is the charter school that we did not authorize. So we will have to report those expenditures even though we have no control over it or anything to that extent. So they call those TISA on behalf. So those are the payments that the state makes on behalf of us, of the charter school that we did not authorize but is operating in our county. So that's what's going to happen is we'll report a revenue of the same amount of the expenditure, so it's just a wash is what that is. The TISA amount that we received extra is on the first page up at the very top in revenues, and the revenue code is 46510, and the amount is $12 million. $12,227,599 is what we received additional TISA funding.
And how many schools is the 8 million?
That's just one, but the state gives us that amount of what we're supposed to budget at the beginning of the years. So whenever we put it in our budget, you can also see it on our 25-26 budget as well. We budget an amount in there that comes from the state. We won't necessarily expense and use revenue of that total amount, but that's what they estimate it to be, and that's what we put down. And like I said, it's basically just a wash because we record the revenue of the same amount and the expenditure of the same amount once they give it to us at year end.
And that's for one school, you said?
That's for RCP, which is Rutherford Collegiate Prep, so.
Commissioner Wilson.
This may be more of a procedure question, but in approving the cleanup for 141, I mean, we go back to the top of the increases. For us to pass this cleanup, do we not need to go ahead and approve the money from 143 going into 141 first? Because 141, if we approve this, we haven't actually officially voted on transferring the $3,484,173 into this, which this is saying we have. So do we need to procedurally go ahead and we can talk about this, but do we need to do 143 first and then do 141 at the end?
My first response is we could hear all three and bundle in one motion or we could postpone this for the moment and go to 143. That would probably be the cleanest. But having started this.
All at once if we felt comfortable, or at least the 143 would have to come before the 141.
I want to just, are there any more questions currently about Fund 141 amendment? Otherwise, we will go to 143. And there's two 143s. Let's hear both of those, ask our questions, then we can come back. And I'm going to have 3 votes, though. I don't want to, but I just want to make sure everybody exhausts their questions on this. So if we're good for the moment, we're going to step aside from this 141 transfer, go to whichever one Brian requests. But trust, we will come back to this before we vote, okay? This is not finished. You good with that, Vice Chair? Trey, you good with that?
Do you want me to do both 143s at the same time, or do you want me to do those individual?
Individually.
Okay, so the first one is Fund 143 Budget Amendment. This is the FY 24-25 Centralized Cafeteria Fund Amendment that increases 99,100,504 indirect costs and decreases 34,570 restricted fund balance in the amount of $3,484,173 to budget for indirect costs that are accumulated in Fund 141 being reimbursed by Fund 143. Indirect costs are incurred for the benefit of multiple programs, functions, and other cost objectives that cannot be readily identified as having been occurred, especially for the school's food service program. Indirect cost rates are calculated annually by TDOE, and child nutrition programs use the unrestricted indirect costs. The FY 24-25 unrestricted indirect cost rate for RCS is 11.33%.
If there's no questions, we can look at if the other 143, and then we can consider both. Does the other 143 tie back to this in any way?
Not
Okay.
particularly.
That's a lot of paragraph. You may need to break that down into layman's terms, but clear this up for me, yeah.
Okay, so what indirect costs are basically those costs that are indirectly related to the Central Cafeteria School program. So those, for example, can be electricity, water, utilities that we pay for directly out of 141, Fund 141. So what this indirect cost allows us to be able to do is move some of the money from the cafeteria fund back into 141 to cover those costs that we pay for 100% out of general purpose 141 fund. So basically what this does is if you take the calculation, and it's a calculation, and if you want me to go into it, I can, but it's an indirect cost calculation, and you take that 11.33% and multiply that out, and that gives you the $3.4 million that we're budgeting or moving from Fund 143 into Fund 141. That's part of this cleanup amendment in 141 as well. So it's just basically indirect cost items, as I read here, that are incurred for the benefit of multiple programs, functions, and other cost objectives that cannot be readily identified Another thing would be, we have a school nutrition accountant. Their salary is paid out of Fund 141. This helps pay for their part of their salary for administrating the central cafeteria program. So,
Thank you.
Question.
Commissioner
And
Oliver?
I know I asked this before, so why is it that you're doing this? What's the reason for trying to pay down, quote unquote, what you all said, as it relates to this 143 account?
well, first, like I said, it helps cover some of the cost in 141, so that's the first reason why we're doing it. In the past, we never really had a huge fund balance in 143 like we do now. So we weren't able to move that money in order to be able to cover those costs in 141. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing it. And also that helps us be able to budget additional revenue in 141 to where we can put that money in those appropriate line items in there to cover an unforeseen cost or something to that extent that, we may need that additional amount of money for. So it helps basically cover and transfer that money over into Fund 141.
Is there a reason why those costs can't be allocated under this 143? And then you don't necessarily have to move the money, but fund what you need out of 143?
For items such as utilities, electricity, things like that, there is not line items in Fund 143 for us to budget for, and that comes from the comptroller's office, the chart of accounts that we have to use. So those type items like that, we're not able to budget from. Yeah, and so one of the other things is we don't have separate meters for the cafeterias, so we wouldn't know exactly how much that would be to pay, specifically for those cafeteria operations. So that's one of the other reasons why, and they also, so 143 is not the only fund that is allowed indirect costs. 142, our federal funding, also has a restricted indirect cost that we also transfer money from 142 into 141 to cover those costs that 142 incurs indirectly in the operation of 141. So.
The funds in 143 come from where?
There are federal funds, and there are also funding from payments from for school lunches, breakfast. Your majority is your federal funding, USDA funding.
Right. Okay, and I asked previously at our last meeting about why we can't pay for school meals. How much would it cost to provide meals to our students? Since you're saying you have to pay down these funds, I asked for information relative to I was told that you couldn't use these funds, so I asked for proof of that. And then I'm curious, how much would it cost to feed our students?
To feed our students for free would basically bankrupt the 143 fund in probably less than a year. And the reason why I say that is because we spend probably approximately, and let me just give you some numbers from last year, because this year's not finished, so I don't want to give numbers I don't have. But in 23-24, we had actual revenue of $26.3 million. We had expenditures of $25.1 million, which gave us a surplus of $1.2. $7.3 million of that revenue was for lunch payments, or was from lunch payments from students. So if we took that $7.3 million away, we closed the year at $22.9 million in our fund balance, or 67.2%. If we took that $7.3 million away, we would be looking at a deficit of $6.1 million. And when I say that, that means we offer lunch to all students for free. So $6.1 million is what it would have been for the year to take those lunch payments away. The fund balance would have been at that point in time $16.8 million instead of the 22.9 or 49.2. So it would decrease the fund balance by 18%, which at the end of the day would have been catastrophic to that fund. And then in year two, that would basically break it or take it all the way, our fund balance all the way down below where we've got to have at least 3 months of operating expenditures. And for last year, 3 months of operating expenditures would have been $6.3 million, which is an 18.4% fund balance. So 12.6 million, if you ask our finance director, county finance director, he would prefer 6 months of operating expenditures in there. So that would be 12.6 million if we were using last year's numbers. So to do so, you're looking at between $7.3 million is what, if we had have offered free lunch for everybody last year and it made nobody pay. And that's not also including the bad meal debt that we're accumulating as well because of unpaid lunches. So 7.3 million, 7.3 to $8 million, I would say somewhere, if I had to estimate, is how much it would cost us if we did not, if we tried to feed everyone for free.
Well, you have school systems across the state that feed all of their kids. Why can't we?
Probably because, most likely, those school
Because
systems.
they have programs that do that. So why doesn't Rutherford County take advantage of that?
They are on what they call, most likely, the community eligibility program. You have to hit a certain number of poverty or free and reduced lunches in order to be able to get there. The last time we checked, we were not there yet. So, and a lot of those school districts that when I used to work for the state and help them with their lunch programs, a lot of those districts that were using the community eligibility program were still running in the red because it was costing them more to run it for free than what they were receiving in reimbursements from the federal government. So that's one of the things we have to take into consideration for that.
And that number you said we would have to meet, because over 50% of our students qualified for free or reduced lunch?
Dropped this year. It's in the 40s this year. It dropped this year because of the Medicaid reimbursement change from the State Department. So it's mid to low 40s. It did drop this year, and we lost TISA funding because of it.
Well, my concern, I guess, is we talk about having to utilize these funds, and we talk about bad meal debts, and we know our families need relief. So I'm just curious if there's any way we could provide that relief by providing meals for these students. So that's the impetus for the questions that I'm asking.
And I understand, and as Michael had expressed earlier, I think, in one of the previous meetings we had, we do not receive, with the current school nutrition program that we have, we do not receive funding in advance. So everything is on a reimbursement basis. So some of those reimbursements don't come in for 2 or 3 months until after, the money has already been expensed, which could immediately cause a cash flow issue within that fund. So that's one of the downfalls of trying to be able to, pay 100% of school lunches. Basically, the second and most concerning portion is it's just not sustainable. I mean, we might be able to do it for a year, but after that, our fund balance would be depleted, and as of right now, we're already budgeting into the deficit in the fund balance as we speak for next year, just to use those funds down. I think now, though, we have a new program, kind of a new director. So I think what their plan is to spend those funds down. We're doing a lot of renovations in the kitchens, buying new equipment, stoves, serving lines, coolers, all that stuff that, frankly, we've got $1.8 million that we've encumbered this year or expensed this year, just to spend the money down, not because we have it, but because those projects needed to be updated for a long time. So now we're actually getting that underway. So that is going to help us as well be able to not keep such a huge fund balance. And we'll be able to more balance that budget out and hopefully keep our revenues and expenditures, where we're not throwing too much money in fund balance, but yet we're also not spending in a deficit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wilson. I started calling you Paul Johnson. Commissioner Wilson.
I thought that might happen, Chairman.
Yes, thank you.
Just to summarize what you said, this is obviously a topic that many people discuss in the county. So to summarize, we are reimbursed federal dollars for students who qualify for the programs, and obviously not reimbursed for students that are not signed up for the programs. So therefore, from what I'm hearing, yes, you have enough money, you could do it once, and basically we're out of money. So if we wanted to sustain a program of feeding students, that's a choice to fund 143 intentionally from other funds in order to feed. So we're not getting reimbursed. It would be something that we decide to fund. And right now we're looking at, just to talk about that, you're just starting at a $6 million price tag per year. Well, I mean, that's a good summary of where we are today. The federal dollars are reimbursement dollars, and they're only to people that have qualified for the existing programs. If we did anything else, it would be on our own at our own expense. Is that a fair way to say it? Okay. I mean, just for further discussions, that's a very crystal clear way to figure out where we are. And if we want to continue the discussions, it's going to take a contribution from our community to do such. Okay. Concerning the 143 budget amendment, I would like to go ahead and move for the approval of the amendment as presented.
We have an appropriate motion and second. Any further discussion on this amendment?
Yes, I do have a question to follow up, because yes, I understand it's a reimbursable thing. How much are we reimbursed compared to how much the budget is?
So let me go off of last year's numbers again. We expensed $25.1 million. Just off of the USDA reimbursements, it was somewhere around $11 to $12 million is how much those reimbursements that came back to us were.
So not quite half,
Not
almost
quite,
50%,
right,
we would
correct.
be reimbursed. So we would be responsible for the other half.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. There are no further questions. Rachel, would you call the roll, please?
Your motion was for Fund 143?
Yes, budget amendment number 2.
Yes. Commissioner Oliver?
Was it number 2 or number 1? I'm sorry. It was number 1, right?
Okay, let's get this very clear for the minutes.
Yes.
Rachel, we are Fund 143, budget amendment number 1. Thank you, Commissioner Oliver. Brian, read the amendment, please.
The amendment number 1?
Number 1.
Okay.
This is the one we're voting on.
Okay, so amendment number 1, this FY24-25 centralized cafeteria fund amendment increases 99,100,504 indirect costs and decreases 34,570 restricted fund balance in the amount of $3,484,173 to budget for indirect costs that are accumulated in Fund 141 being reimbursed by Fund 143. Indirect costs are incurred for the benefit of multiple programs, functions, and other cost objectives and cannot be readily identified as having been incurred, especially for the school food service program. Indirect cost rates are calculated annually by TDOE, and the child nutrition programs use the unrestricted indirect cost rate. The FY24-25 unrestricted indirect cost rate for RCS is 11.33%.
Rachel, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Chairman Dodd?
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes.
Brian, if you would, let's proceed with the cleanup, and then we'll wrap up with 143. Is that appropriate? You'll do number 2, 143, number 2, committee? Brian, proceed with
Okay, so this
Fund
is
143, budget amendment 2.
So this Fund 143 centralized cafeteria year-end cleanup amendment budgets funds for expenditures such as employee payouts, food supplies and materials, and the transportations of those items. The amendment moves money between multiple line items without increasing or decreasing revenue and expenditures. This allows several line items to have money amended in them so they will not be over budget at year-end. So this is a budget neutral, or what I call a budget neutral cleanup, because there is no revenue, additional revenue or expenditures.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon? Ms. Oliver?
Yes. So on this 143, it's showing supervisor, director, personnel. So staff is paid out of 143.
Yes, so the staff that is directly associated with the cafeteria program is paid out of 143.
Okay. And your director makes $215,000 a year?
No, that's actually the director and the assistant director. But if you see that $17,000, that amount right there is for his payout because he is no longer with us, so we had to pay out his vacation leave. So that's what that amount is. But currently, right now, we're just paying just one director, our interim director in that line.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve School Nutrition Fund 143 budget amendment number 2. Any more questions or discussion? Rachel, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Davidson,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch, Commissioner Oliver,
Aye.
Chairman Dodd.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Brian, please proceed with the 141 cleanup.
Do you want me to reread it?
Committee, anybody want to reread this? Reread just,
Is there additional questions?
Excuse me, I thought we could do additional questions. Is that not the
absolutely,
case?
that's what I want to say. Reread the motion so we can have further discussion.
Okay. So Fund 141 budget, Fund 141 fund balance amendment. This year in cleanup amendment budgets $17,402,929 for items such as leave payouts, increases for degree and certification, pay scales changes, stipends, insurance premium increases, adjustment for amended Innovative Schools Model Program, additional costs for contracted services, and capital outlay for construction. Also, the increased cost for liability insurance due to recent transportation claims is included in the amendment. Next, it budgets additional expenditures for maintenance, custodial supplies, student and staff support, contracted services. Finally, it funds the purchase of one-to-one computers for high school students and student laptops and mobile charging stations for elementary schools. Funding from these expenses come from additional TISA and state revenue, as well as indirect costs from cafeteria program. This revenue and transfers are collected above budget amount and allow additional expenditures in the movement of current budgeted expenditures between multiple counts and within object codes.
Thank you. Now, discussion.
So these salaries, are these the salaries that are in alignment with trying to lift the table to get staff where, teachers or whatever at the 50,000 minimum?
Are you?
Or is this for the June, July, August payments that were referred to?
That's for those June, July, August payments. So what our 25-26 budget is what's trying to get those in line with the 50,000.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
that's not in here. This is just moving this in there to be able to make sure we have enough in there to cover those 3 payrolls.
Gotcha. Follow-up question to that, considering the 50,000 is like minimum across the state, so everybody's getting there. What has the board discussed in order to make Rutherford County competitive and not have to chase the rabbit, so to speak, in order to maintain our staff?
Unfortunately, next year, we're looking at a 2 to 2.5% raise, so we will barely be over 50,000 with our new teachers. So we've talked about it with our board for about 2.5 years. With our funding levels, it'll be about 50,200 or 50,300 for new teachers. We've really invested in veteran teachers, and so our salary schedule has an average of 1.6% increase every single year, and that was not the case before 3 years ago. There were 3 or 4 years where it stayed completely the same, and that has allowed us to retain our teachers and not lose them to other districts. I am concerned about the new teacher portion because you're right. Our sister city or sister district in the city already is above 50,000. A lot of districts already are, but we were losing our veteran teachers, and I wanted to make sure we kept the quality first. So that was where we were trying to hit first, and we'll try to come back and do more for new teachers depending on what funding's available. But you're spot on. And then we try to sell. We do not have very many openings right now, and we try to sell that our school culture and district culture helps offset that. And so far, we've been successful with that. But I do worry about the new teachers.
And this might be my last question. Considering the new law that's coming into place July 1, banning electronics in the classroom, why such a large purchase on electronics when laptops are listed under there?
Yep, great question. So this is for high school, and high school students, all of their assessments are online. This is something that we are trying to get conversations between the state legislature and the Tennessee Department of Education. There's going to be a push next year to move all elementary testing online as well, which goes completely against what the legislature's intent is to remove devices from students, especially for high school students, preparing them for college and career when that is how they're going to be in the workforce. We're staying 1-to-1 at the high school and moving 2-to-1 everywhere else. They are allowed to still use devices for instructional purposes. I can't speak for our board, but we have our policy meeting. We're fully intending to propose procedures for the board to implement policy that it is just a complete no use of cell phones during the school day, and so that any communication would have to come through their school devices, through email, those different types of things. So we've had that exact same conversation. There's a disconnect between what the right-hand and left-handers is talking about.
Okay, so with the law saying no use during instructional time, and you're going to use it during instructional time, so we'll be breaking the law.
No, you're allowed to use it during instructional time.
I read it said no
Says you
use
can
during
use
instructional time.
The teacher can give use during instructional time.
I didn't read that, so that's why I was concerned.
No, you can. And our TSBA, is our Tennessee School Board Association model policy, has that outlined as well. So, yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, committee. We have heard the 141 cleanup end-of-year budget, recognizing revenue and new expenditures. There you are. Yes, Mr. Wilson.
First, just a quick comment. I'm very grateful that we're able to work out getting these laptops purchased through this TISA funding and this cleanup. That's a big one off of us because I know we're looking at some other purchases. I'd like to talk about that just briefly before we get out of here today, was just a couple of things about the coming year.
Please.
Because obviously the laptops were one of the ones we knew was going to be a big line item purchase we had to do. But concerning the Fund 141 year-end cleanup balance amendment, I move for its approval.
Laura? Great. So we have a appropriate motion and second. Any further discussion? Rachel, call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Dodd?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Wilson, I believe you wanted to have a wrap-up comment?
Yes, Chairman. Just wanted to while we have a couple minutes moving into our next fiscal year, because we start the next budget as soon as we pass this one, don't we?
We've already started it, so yes.
So obviously a land purchase is something I know would be coming up. I'm just looking for just anything off the top of your mind that we're looking at that are additional funding requests that you may see over the next 12 months. And do you have any, I don't want to put any dollar amount on the land, but a time of when you may be bringing that would be great for discussion here today.
Yeah, so two things kind of connected with that. Land, very well, I would expect, so we're about 3 months in to 2 to 3 months in of the inspection period, somewhere between 11 and 12 million, closer to 12. We do not have funds in 189, which is the building program, to be able to cover that, to move it around. The other portion of that is if we're hoping, and we've been talking about a new high school, if we're hoping to open a new high school in the 28-29 school year, design fees for that new high school would probably be requested during this fiscal year. There could be funds within 189 to cover some of the design fees. I just don't anticipate there being enough to cover land, because land's going to be more than design fees are.
All right, so 90 days, so we're really looking at as soon as September.
And that's if the board decides to vote on
If they
moving
decide to move forward.
Yes.
But it's something for us to be talking about in budget, because I assume, from what I'm hearing, you'll be requesting that money in full from the county commission.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair. That concludes our agenda. If there's no other business, we have to wrap up and allow the next meeting to begin. Without objection, after Chairman Phillips. Okay, and we will have our July meeting. I see no need to. It's on our calendar for the 29th. Thank you, Chairman Phillips, for bringing that up.
I would have been here the week before, so I'm glad you brought that up.
So seeing no further business, I will take a motion for adjournment. We are adjourned.